Good Good afternoon, Dr. Carr. May I call you Bernard?
Of course you can. And this is the right time, isn't it? I've come in at the beginning and not the end.
No, I'm so glad you pointed out to me. For my life of me, I always thought Greenwich Mean Time was the same as London. I didn't realize it was different.
No, well, it isn't during summertime, it's different, yeah. By
Oh,
one by 1 hour.
okay. Well, thank you for calling my attention to it.
Mm.
Uh, we are waiting for Dr. Weissman, but we can make some introductions here. Dr. Carr, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Renner, who's going to be our moderator,
Oh,
Hello,
hello, Jeff.
Dr. Carr.
and
Hello.
Jan Masterson, who's doing the program and introducing you. And in the program, Jeff is going to be introducing you at the conference. And we thought it'd be a good idea to interact on that. And then from there, um, you could get a feel for you, et cetera. But also at the same time, try to have you meet your counterpart, Dr. Weissman, because this conference is going to be more of a conference of interaction rather than breakout sessions. So there'll be
I
a
hope so,
Q&A,
yes.
be a dialogue, and then there's going to be a panel discussion. And so it's important that you and Weissman at least meet each other somehow.
So, but we're giving separate talks, and then is there a dialogue between us?
Yes, separate talks, and then Q&A for each talk, and then a dialogue between you, and then a panel discussion at the end of the day with other people.
Okay, so, and how long is our individual talks? So they just
45 minutes.
okay. And if I remember correctly, the topics I'm doing like the early universe, and she's doing the modern universe. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It's kind of the reason we thought it would be better for you to go second is because there's a bit more of a logical transition to the chemistry side of life because of the early Big Bang and the
Yes,
chemistry
of
that's
course.
developing.
It's logical for her to go first because she's going to be, in some sense, we're going back in time. She's talking about observations of the present epoch.
Exactly, exactly. You would think normally, if you're doing it chronologically, it would be you first, but I think
No, no, no. It makes more sense to go back because that's how observations go, and
exactly, exactly,
you're
exactly.
looking back at greater distances to the Big Bang.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Well,
and
while you're talking, I'm going to see if I can't text her just to remind. Did you get my reminder email?
yeah, I got a reminder from you. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll
Uh,
wait a few more minutes. She may be a little late, but
and the date it's the 17th to the 20th, isn't it, of June?
that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Carr, may I suggest respectfully that you check out the conference website because
Yes.
it will answer a lot of your questions about this kind of thing, how the schedule is, what the program is. It doesn't, at this point, I don't think it has times on there, but it does have the days and the order in which each of you are speaking.
So,
So
Jan,
it'll give you a little sense.
okay, could you give me I don't know if I've got that link. I mean, I'm sure it's in one of Bob's
It's very
emails.
simple. It's
So,
faith-science.org.
which high space
Faith
faith
science
hyphen science
dot org.
dot org. That's well, let me just do that now. Then I can actually do that.
Absolutely. In fact, what we can do is I can do it here too.
Okay, faith hyphen science. That's a very easy email to remember. Dot org. Yep, here it is.
Wonderful. Now,
17th to 20th. Yeah, get early bird discounts. Okay. And so there's physics to creation, chemistry to life, biology to consciousness, psychology to mysticism. Okay. And if I click on one of those, is that physics to creation? Am I the first talk?
Up in the right-hand corner is a menu.
Yep. I
Okay.
click on the menu.
Right. And I believe you're listed under speakers.
Okay. So the speakers is fine. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, there is me. That's fine. Big Bang. So are these the titles, aren't they, of these in the bold white is is that the title of the talk?
Yes, but I'll let Jan bring that up with you at this time.
Okay, atoms of
Okay.
DNA evolutionary theory.
Okay, what's on the website, Dr. Carr, is, if you want to call it like the big the big topic. What I
Yeah,
would like from you, part of what I'm going to put in the individual profiles in the program,
yeah.
I would like, oh gosh, I don't know, a 2 or 3 word title, summary, whatever, of your talk. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be, at this point, it doesn't necessarily have to be what the title of your talk will end up being. But
Oh,
generally speaking, 3 or 4, if you want to call them keywords or key ideas that you want to emphasize, hopefully people will take away from your presentation.
okay. Well, I mean, I want to obviously I'll have a discussion with Jennifer Wiseman so that we don't sort of, because there is a area of overlap. And so but I think it will fairly, she'll have described the observations of the universe's properties, but that will be going back only to a certain time, maybe a million years after the Big Bang. And so I will be talking about the phase, if you like, in the first million years, which then gives rise to the observational properties that Jennifer will have spoken about. So, and it is logical for her to speak first. And I suppose presumably you want me to talk about the early universe in the context of the science religion dialogue. Is that
Yes,
correct? I
like
mean,
for example, the anthropic principle would be obviously.
of course, the anthropic principle is interesting because uh, some people think of it in theological terms. I mean, most physicists prefer to think that it might be something to do with a multiverse, which is more to do with physics. But obviously, some people like to think, well, it could also just be one universe with God who tailor-made it for our existence. So that's the traditional debate. I mean, my own view is that you can have both, is that, if God could just as well work through a multiverse as through a universe. So those are the sort of issues I can discuss if that's going to fit into the program, because
Absolutely, well,
Okay.
absolutely, and I think even the multi-universe, I think physicists have come up to the conclusion that even those had to have a beginning. So it still gets back to an issue. And
yeah, I mean, that's right. So, I mean, it's very simplistically, people say God or multiverse. And indeed, I once organized a meeting called God or Multiverse question mark. But actually, from my perspective, um, a multiverse, it could just as well be created by God as a single universe. If there's
yeah,
only one universe, then you might make an argument that this is a stronger case for God. But if there's a multiverse, it doesn't exclude God. It's just as
No, it
it,
makes God bigger. God made a multiverse. These are different classes of questions, right? So
Good
I've
yeah,
morning.
never.
I mean,
Good morning, Dr. Wiseman.
oh,
Uh,
Hi.
there is Jennifer Wiseman. Hi,
Hi.
Dr.
I
Carr,
don't think
Dr.
we've
Carr,
ever met.
Hi.
Dr. Carr, before I lose my, I have a quick question. I'll come back to you in a minute, Jennifer.
Okay.
Before I lose my thought, Dr. Carr, we're all of an age where that happens frequently. So your 3 or 4 words, if you want to call it summation, would be single universe versus multi-universe.
So I was going to ask you what emphasis you want. I mean, there was this meeting I organized called God or Multiverse, but it's a very misleading. I mean, you want a few key words. I mean,
Mhm.
I wasn't going to have the whole discussion based on the anthropic principle and the multiverse, even though that's a natural overlap between science and theology. I wanted
Okay.
also to get into, the more general issue of, do you need a creator? What happened at the Big Bang? If the Big Bang is a singularity, a lot of people will take the view, well, physicists can trace back the history of the universe very close to the Big Bang, but when you get to the Big Bang, you reach singularity, and that goes beyond physics, and therefore you need God to light the fuse. So that's the sort of one of the possible theological arguments. On the other hand, someone like Stephen Hawking, who of course can't speak for himself anymore, he would argue no, he can solve the problem of singularities with quantum cosmology, so he doesn't need God. the universe can create itself and things. Well, I disagree with Stephen, but that's a view which you get. And so, I mean, that's something I could sort of also talk about, how you resolve that paradox. And the question is, if the universe, did it begin really with a singularity, or was it a cyclic universe? In which case, you're putting back the issue of how the universe began, maybe to many cycles. But so I don't want to just talk about the fine tunings, though that is one issue. I want on the multiverse. I want to talk about the general issue of whether physics alone is going to explain it. And I have another interest of mine, which may or may not fit into your remit, which I'll explain. I'm very interested in consciousness, and I noticed, in fact, you've got people talking on that subject. So for me, what is missing in physics is consciousness. And my own view is that the new paradigm of physics, the next paradigm of physics, will make explicit reference to consciousness. Now, of course, people like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, who's talking about saying that all the time. So this idea about 20 years ago was completely heretical, but now it's becoming almost mainstream. So there are quite a lot of physicists who would say physics must expand to accommodate consciousness, or if you like, mind is fundamental. And I'm of that view. And I also think that in this extended paradigm of physics, where mind is fundamental, what you're going to argue is that when you get to the very beginning of the Big Bang, or the beginning of the universe, whenever it was, that's where mind is going to come in, because it's at this. If you think of physics, you've got all these scales of structure. I have my favorite image, which is the cosmic Ouroboros, which you may have seen. It's got all the scales of structure, and where the head meets the tail at the top, that is the Big Bang. Okay, but it's where quantum theory meets relativity theory. That's your final theory of physics. And therefore, from this sort of approach, that is where, if you like, mind is going to come in, or where consciousness is going to come in. And therefore, from my perspective, and I'm not talking as a typical physicist here, I don't know that Jenny would agree with me either, but from my perspective, I say the paradigm required to actually explain the Big Bang will also be the paradigm which is going to make reference to consciousness and mind. And as I said, that's not really so controversial. There are plenty of eminent physicists who entertain that idea now. So that's something I could also stress. But there's 2 points. I always say you've got the 3 worlds. You've got matter, mind, and spirit. And in some sense, one can try and expand science. Science is traditionally associated with the material world, but if you try and expand science to accommodate mind and consciousness, that's the sort of approach people like Penrose and Hameroff are advocating. I mean, that's one step. And personally, I think is a realistic step. I think that may happen. But there's a step beyond that. And that is when you extend to accommodate spirit as well as mind. Now, that's much more controversial in the sense that there are lots of physicists who are happy to extend physics to accommodate mind, but they don't want to extend it to accommodate spirit, because spirit is still regarded as a taboo word to most physicists. So, on the other hand, that may be relevant to your meeting. So I was going to ask for your guidance. Do you want me to talk about those sorts of issues?
I would love to talk about it. Thank you for bringing it up. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Wiseman. And I owe you an apology. I misspelled your name on one of my emails, and I was typing it real quick. But
I didn't notice. Okay.
And she's involved in NASA and in the Weber launch, and so can give a sense of the magnitude of the universe and her specialty. And I want to introduce you to Jeff Renner, who's introducing these speakers at the conference.
Hi.
And,
Hi there.
And Jan Masterson, who's doing the program. So both of them would like to interview both of you, and because ultimately that's how you're going to be introduced. Now, and I'll turn it over to them once I give you the background of this that you perfectly summarized. I am not an expert at all of this, but of course I wrote a book, and of course that makes you an expert. I don't know what that means. And so the 4 chapters of the book are the sections of this conference. And we culminate in, there's physics of creation, which is what you're doing. There's chemistry to life, which kind of blends from the early chemistry of the singularity. Then there's the biology to consciousness, which relates exactly to what you're talking about. This whole conference loops back to physics. Absolutely. That's the whole concept. And so that's where we bring in a speaker like Hammerhoff, who's working with Penrose on
absolutely, yeah.
And so that's exactly where we're headed. Exactly.
But the interesting thing, Bob, is that even Hammerhoff, I think you'll find, is a little bit hesitant to talk about spirituality and things. So what I was really asking, and I'd be interested in Jenny's opinion here, because I've never met Jenny, so I don't know how she reacts to this suggestion. But do you want to extend the discussion from consciousness to spirituality, or not? Because that determines my answer, for example, to Jan's question. I mean, it's just a question of whether, because I don't know, Jenny, for example, might not be comfortable getting into that sort of dialogue. But I mean, it's really what you want as the organizer of the conference. Do you want us just to go as far as consciousness, or to get into more explicitly theological issues to do with spirituality?
That's going to be covered at the end of the conference, correct, Bob? One of the final speakers is going to be talking about that.
Yes, but I don't want to interfere with the conversation the two of them are having. Certainly, Jennifer and you are going in that sequence. Jennifer first, then you, Bernard, and it's just a piece of the whole puzzle. Ultimately, at the very end, we have Hammerhoff, and to address what you brought up about him.
Right.
He was one of the speakers. In fact, maybe the only speaker. He said, "Now, I'm not very religious. You want somebody religious?" I said, "No, I want science. I want solid science."
Yeah.
That's when he started to talk about consciousness predating birth and surviving death.
Yeah.
In terms of going to the spiritual, that's where Finley comes in psychotherapy and mysticism. So that's where we're launching it. Now, I think every speaker along the way, knowing where we're headed, I invite you to address these subjects that Bernard's bringing up. And Jennifer, I'm anxious to hear your answer to his question.
Hi. Okay. So, I'm sorry I joined after you began your conversation, so I kind of missed some of the backdrop of this, but
Not much.
I can tell you what started it. I asked, and I'm going to ask you the same question. In a 3 or 4 word summary, what is your talk going to cover?
Okay.
Generally speaking. Now, it doesn't have to be the title, of what you're going to talk about, but generally, 3 or 4 words, because what I'm doing is I'm writing a profile for the program, and I'm hoping, please, God, that the attendees will look at this, perhaps just as just before you come on stage to speak, and have kind of an idea what to expect.
Yes.
So it's, if you want to call it, it's kind of a teaser that I want to put in the program about what you all are going to touch on in your presentations. So that's what started Dr. Carr speaking.
Understood. So,
and I was explaining, Jennifer, that I can either give a purely physics-based talk, such as I would give to cosmologists about the early universe, a popular talk on cosmology, or I can veer into these more unconventional areas from a physicist perspective, such as consciousness or even spirituality. And my suspicion is that I'm pretty safe to talk about consciousness because it'll link up to what's said later. I'm not so sure about whether I should be talking about things like spirituality. It may be easier just to refer to the future speaker about that. But also, we're in the same session, Jenny, so I want to do something which I don't want to do something which makes you uncomfortable.
No, so I'm an astrophysicist at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and my the thing that I can do here is give, actually, I would say, a more, I was going to say down to earth, but that's exactly not it. We're looking out beyond Earth, but an overview of what we're actually observationally discovering about the universe. And I would say that you might want to consider, and Robert, do you like to go by Robert or Bob? What is your
Bob's fine.
Bob? And so Jennifer's fine for me. I I'm wondering if, and may I, Dr. Carr, do you like to be called Dr. Carr or
Oh, Bernard is fine,
Bernard? Okay. Do
but
you,
not Bernie. Some Americans call me
Bernard? Yes, right. Okay, right. All right. I'll call you Bernard, and if you call me Jennifer, we'll all be good. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Bernard, if you should go first, because my talk would be more about after the Big Bang is over and we're starting to form galaxies, what happens between the first stars and galaxies and what we have today, which is galaxies with stars and planets that are forming, and planets, at least one of them has life. And so all of that kind of bridge of 13 billion years after the Big Bang, but to the point where we have life. And then after me, I understand you have maybe a speaker who can talk more specifically to astrobiology. So I'm wondering if you might want me to be the second speaker instead of the first one, but that, we can talk about that. But because what I'm best at is actually just showing people kind of, in a more educational way. But a lot of people really just do not know what we have found, especially in the last decade, in general astronomy with telescopes like Hubble and Webb. Well, we've discovered incredibly about the earliest galaxies, and then how these generations of stars throughout most of cosmic history have enriched galaxies to the point where we can now have planets forming around stars, and we can see, we're detecting these exoplanets, we're starting to study the nature of them, we're starting to figure out whether any of them could actually be habitable, and we're preparing for future facilities that might be able to detect simple life. So I'm more prepared to give a kind of science overview of everything we've discovered about the dynamics of the universe leading to life, but not the very beginning. I'm not an expert on the Big Bang or the, whether there could be a multiverse or what happened in the first 3 minutes or what. I'm more in that everything else, what happened when the first galaxies and stars did begin to form, and then what we see through looking in deep space throughout billions of years. We can actually see the evolution of galaxies to the point where we can see how the universe has evolved to become habitable for life. And now in our own epoch of cosmic time, we're actually detecting a very diverse palette of planets and trying to figure out ways of discerning whether any of them have simple life, and how we would know that, and what this implies a little bit toward the role of human life in this amazing universe. And then I can comment a little bit about my own philosophical perspective about the presence of life and human life, and are we significant or are we not? That's a philosophical question. And then someone else can pick up the pieces of the actual astrobiology details if you have a speaker on that level. So that's kind of what I'm more prepared to talk about, is educating people on what we actually have found, and then a little bit about how I respond to this as a person of faith. But
and that's what I was expecting from you. That's exactly what I was expecting from you. Go ahead.
But can I react? Because Jennifer, I think that's great what you're going to talk about. But the only thing I would say is that I actually think it's more logical for you to go first. And the reason I say that is that although it's true, of course, the Big Bang becomes before all the things you're talking about evolutionary wise, the fact of the matter is that when astronomers make observations, they're looking back in time, and they're looking at greater distances to greater and greater time, and the history of astronomy is going back to these early times. So in fact, if you see the background, my background to my zoom image, it's got the whole universe. So in some sense, but it goes out to the edge of the visible universe. So I would imagine in some sense you're talking about things that happened after the first million years, which is essentially you're essentially talking about everything inside this my halo, if you like.
Yes, that's right. Right.
point is, having done that, which I know you'll describe very vividly, and in a very clear way, that then gives me an incentive to say, well, these are the observations we want to explain. How can the Big Bang explain it? And in some sense, from my perspective, it's good to have the observations we're trying to explain before I start trying to give the explanations. Because if I start talking about all the things the Big Bang can explain without first having had the evidence, the observational features explained by you, then my talk is a little bit sort of, they've got to wait,
Okay.
for a time. So I logically think that actually it's better for your talk to go first. Also, my talk may perhaps risk being a little bit more technical. Everyone will be, I don't want it to be too technical, but I mean, by its very nature, it risks becoming more technical, whereas you can be just produced, you will have these wonderful photographs from the Webb telescope and things like that. So I would have thought your talk might be an easier introduction to the day. And so that's my own view. And then also, I think they want me to talk about the anthropic fine-tunings. But in some sense, it's a bit hard to talk about the anthropic fine-tunings until someone has talked about the things we're trying to, which are finely tuned, because the argument is that stars and galaxies and people require some fine tuning, but they need to have heard about the stars and the galaxies before they can understand it. So, are you okay with that, or what?
I'm absolutely fine with that. It just as on the cosmic timeline, it sounds like I'll be doing the middle part, and then we'll jump back to you, the first part, and then maybe after me, people talking about the later part. So as long as people, but that's okay. We can, people will get the idea.
That was one of the reasons.
I don't want to interfere with the flow here, but very quickly, I want to mention that if you take a look at the book that I wrote, it was more of a journey through those phases. And the reason that why I wanted you to go first, Jennifer, was the very reason Bernard pointed out, and ultimately how that transitions to the early chemistry leading to life. And then we go to the next section. So if you look at the sequence of speakers, we're building off of each other, and hence why one of the thoughts was to have a transition question posed by a previous speaker answered by the next speaker, and then the next speaker poses another question to the next speaker, so that we have some continuity in this conference, unlike most conferences where they're siloed and you can't figure out what that talk has to do with anything with this talk. That's the whole objective.
And also biology. I mean, I will probably end up talking about the anthropic fine-tunings because they reflect things that maybe went on in the Big Bang, but that will fairly naturally lead on to the biological discussion.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. May I jump in here for a moment before I lose my thoughts, which happens frequently? Jennifer, from what I listened very carefully to what you just said. How about if I tease them with, you're going to be talking about the dynamics of discovering what has happened and is happening in the universe. Does that kind of cover what you said?
Yeah. I mean, are you looking for a title or
no, not necessarily. No, I'm just looking for a teaser, kind of like years ago, my first job out of college was writing advertising copy. So what I'm looking for is a headline to catch their attention when they read your profile.
Okay.
All right.
The dynamics might not be the best word. Obviously, it's for you to decide, Jennifer, but somehow the word dynamics, I don't know, that sounds a bit technical.
Observation, then? Just discovering what has happened and what is happening in the universe. I'll come up with the right word. Dr. Carr, how about how the Big Bang explains matter, mind, and or spirit?
Well, yes. No, I'm happy to do that, but then that's why I wanted to see how Jennifer reacted to.
Let me put a little phrase in the chat here that might work for you. It's not 4 words, but it's more like 10 words, but
too long. I gotta shorten it.
Oh, well, then how about just how our amazing universe developed or something like that?
That sounds great. I'm just looking for something seriously. I want it's a teaser. Okay.
And in some sense, in time, Jennifer, is it fair to say that you'll probably be going back to you'll be including the microwave background, will you, in your talks?
Barely. I mean, I might mention it, but I mean, that's kind of the smoking gun for the Big Bang. But
Okay, that's fine because
really, I tend to focus more on okay, so we've got a universe, we've got a cooling universe, and now we have atoms that are forming gas and first stars, and I kind of go from there. So if you can take on
so you're
every
going from a billion years, probably. I mean,
yeah. Or
if
at least, I
we
mean, we're seeing within the first few 100 million years, I'll probably show some of those early galaxies that we're now seeing with Webb and Hubble. But that's, well beyond the Big Bang. So so if you
that makes a lot of sense because I mean, the question was whether the transition is at a million years, which is the microwave background, or a billion years, which is the first stars and galaxies. But I quite like the idea of yours. And I think what you want to do is to start at a billion years when you get the first stars and galaxies,
well,
because
actually, we're seeing galaxies now that are about 400 million years after the Big Bang. They've already formed. So
oh, right, okay, well,
yeah, so
whatever
hot
the
off the press. Yes, yes. So we're seeing
context
galaxies
you're
form early.
dealing. I like this because you're dealing with what we actually see. So
Exactly.
you're dealing with if you're talking about faith and observations, in some sense, the Big Bang is all to do, and what I'm talking about, i.e., the first million years or whatever, it's really more based on faith than observations because we're only looking at the relics,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things that went on, whereas you're looking at things you actually see. So wherever the division comes, maybe it's 400 million years or whatever, that's quite a nice division because we can say that Jennifer is dealing with what we see with our eyes and of course our instruments, and I'm dealing with what we speculate about with our minds.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I also wonder if at some point, I don't know how you're arranging the program, but you might want to have a conversation between the speakers. I mean, audiences usually like to
That's what we
see.
covered before you joined, but I'll mention it very quickly.
Okay.
Each of you are going to be giving a 45-minute talk, followed by a Q&A. And then there's going to be a dialogue between the two of you. And Jeff Renner is going to manage that. And I don't think you're going to need much management because you're doing it right now.
No. I can tell just listening to
at the end of the day, there's going to be a panel discussion of the speakers during that day. And this is a 2-day conference. And so this is going to be much more interactive with the audience and the registrants in terms of interaction and dynamics. It's not just your talk, as opposed to a typical conference where there are breakout sessions and they make no sense compared to the theme. We're trying to hold a theme that pulls straight through.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Now, so one of those things is that we may have different perspectives, maybe even different opinions, and I think that's okay, right? Like I personally, so I'm a Christian, I'm a person of faith, but I don't pin my faith on whether the universe is fine-tuned or not. In fact, I get kind of nervous about fine-tuning arguments because I mean it's interesting to me that the fundamental forces of the universe seem to be the perfect quantities to produce the universe we exist in, but I didn't know that till well beyond my coming of faith. My faith doesn't depend on that. I'm saying, so if we find out tomorrow that the universe in fact is not fine-tuned, that these fundamental constants could be a wide range and you still end up with conscious life, well, then that's fine. To me, it's like my faith does not depend on whether the universe is fine-tuned. I don't think fine-tuning needs to be a central apologetic for faith, but others disagree. So, these are the kinds of things that we could discuss if they're of interest. Yeah.
This is what's going to come up in the panel discussions. These types of questions will come up in the panel discussions at the end of each day when there's everybody from that particular day is on stage discussing it and answering questions from the audience. These are the types of things that will come up.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what we're hoping they'll come up. We want to make people think. That's the whole deal. Make people think. And the way they can do this is hear the different parts of it and then put it together However, they can put it together using the facts that the scientists and the clergy have given them.
Yeah, Bernard, you were going to say something?
Well, I just wanted to ask Jennifer something really, because I'm quite used to having debates about the anthropic principle with both theologians and with scientists and with physicists, and of course there are different views. I think it's nice to have different views. I mean, I welcome that, and the whole point is that Jenny said that she doesn't bathe her face on the anthropic fine tunings, and of course that's correct because one shouldn't. But and most of the problems with the anthropic principle was that people thought it was too theological. That's why the physicists rejected it. Now, with all this developments in theories of the multiverse, we now have a more physical-based explanation for the fine tunings, which doesn't need God at all. I think we discussed this before you joined us, Jennifer. So in some sense, that's a nice, interesting discussion. And
Right.
But I also wanted to ask Jennifer, because I'm very happy to talk about the anthropic principle, because it's something which it's respectable. Even, I mean, some physicists aren't comfortable with it, certainly, but nevertheless, it's something which there are lots of debates on, and it's. However, I was a little bit more wary about talking about something which Jennifer might be uncomfortable talking about, because I didn't know about your Christian background, Jennifer. So, for example, I'm happy to refer to consciousness because that's now becoming more acceptable. I mean, anthropic used to be completely taboo. Now that's really that's been acceptable now for 20 years, in the sense that eminent physicists, at least some of them, accept it. Consciousness, it used to be taboo until about 10 years ago, and now that's becoming relatively respectable. But the G word, God, or the S word, spirituality, it still makes most physicists uncomfortable. But of course, this is going to be in a theological setting. But I just wanted to ask you, will you be embarrassed if I start talking about spirituality? I mean, even if only briefly. I mean, or would you be more comfortable if I really kept to a more physicist
Me
context?
personally, I don't care what, I mean, I think it's rich for you to talk about whatever you
Okay.
want. I mean, because to me, there's the physics, which we can discuss, and physics proceeds according to certain principles, and it proceeds within certain boundaries, actually, of the kinds of things physics can address. And when you get to concepts like spirituality, I mean, that becomes ill-defined in a sense of, is this these kinds of things depend on the person's belief systems, which can be a little bit outside of science. Consciousness is a different thing. I believe consciousness is something that can, at least in principle, be described scientifically, because we can try to understand what that means. But spirituality and belief in God and all of that is very real to me, but it's a little bit beyond what physics can address.
So let me address that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a faith and science conference, and I believe that the two are approaching each other asymptotically. They're never going to touch, and you're not going to prove the existence of God with science.
Yeah.
So just forget it. So I don't think it's an issue. It's a matter of when people start talking about the faith side, is it getting to be more consistent with the science, not as in an asymptotic way, not in an absolute way. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. So when people ask me about, personally, how I see these things together, to me, the universe makes a lot more sense when I see how it's evolved to the point where it sustains life that can think about itself. That makes more sense to me if there's some overarching purpose than not. But I don't require everyone else to come to that same conclusion. So there's some freedom, and yeah.
Jan came up with a perfect point, and that is this subject you're talking about now doesn't take place in the talk necessarily. It's mainly the discussion afterwards.
Yeah, that would be rich. Yeah. And then also, when you come to specifics of like Christian faith, where you have God incarnate in a Homo sapien, on a planet, so this gets into very specific things, which are in some sense items of faith, but also in some sense items of history. To me, what I look at is the character qualities of humans, both good and bad, that are described in the Bible, and I see them in reality all around me, the good and the evil, and it lends credibility to the story. But not everyone would come to that same conclusion, so I can only speak to how I see, as you say, Bob, these things coming asymptotically closer and closer together to me, and why I see it that way, but it's not something that I can prove with a formula to somebody else. It's not these are not scientific conclusions, but I would say that for me, the scientific findings are more congruent with the faith perspective I've come to than coming to a no faith perspective. But not everyone else would come to that conclusion. So I think you're right that we can talk these things through better in the discussion sections of the meeting than in
Exactly.
necessarily in the formal presentations. Although I might say a few things about, how I see, how some of what we see in terms of the evolution of the universe is, to me, speaks, points me towards seeing purpose. But that's a little bit beyond.
Please keep in mind that this conference is a couple of things. First of all, it's very interfaith.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a lot of different thoughts about how people view their deity, whatever they call him or her. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's interfaith. And the way, just blame this on me. Okay. The way I've been promoting this conference is the speakers will be presenting, keeping in mind, these are non-scientists and non-theologians. So both areas have to keep it down where we dummies here that are neither one can understand what you're saying. That's part of the reason why Bob's book has been so effective, because he's very conscious of that. Remembering that you don't want to talk down to scientists. Don't get me wrong. We don't want to talk down to scientists, but we don't want to talk over other people's heads. Same with the faith part of it. So if you kind of plant that in the back of your heads, it might help you a little bit with what you seem to be struggling, how you're going to approach some of the different facts.
And in the panel discussion, there on the website, there are some topics on the panel discussion that might come up. I addressed it in my book, and it's not something you have to talk about, but I would recommend you look at the website so that when the panel discussion comes up, Jeff may raise these, and I think you got to have thought about it a little bit, and I'm sure you have. You're very smart people, but that's just to mention the side on how the topics will come up in the panel discussion.
Well, actually, I found this discussion very useful because, even knowing that people are going to be talking about more spiritual, theological type things later is very helpful for me, because it means that I can refer to these things briefly, but I'm not going to get into a prolonged discussion. And of course, we can have a discussion with Jennifer and myself as well. But we'll bear in mind that later on, these topics will be discussed in great detail, because, as I said, I could give a talk purely focusing on physics in theory, but it's just a question of how much one says about these other issues. And by the way, sorry, I can't remember all the people speaking, but are there theologians speaking, presumably? Is that right?
Well, at the beginning of every day, we're having an opening prayer by theologians, rabbis, Sufis, Islam Sufis.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the whole concept is to present that as a interfaith centering prayer, an interfaith way of praying in silence without words, because in the silence, there's no dogma. And that leads into the final discussion on consciousness and mysticism. That's where we're headed.
So that will be all in the last day. But do you have theologians talking in that session? As well as giving prayers. You said there will be prayers every day, but there will be theologians speaking.
Yes and no. If you have to look at the program. And how much time do you have, Jennifer, by the way, for this discussion?
I can stay about 25 more minutes.
Okay.
Because I have some
When
questions.
you're having the opening
Yeah,
speaker,
me
I'll
too.
cover it very quickly. Opening speaker is the Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, Cardinal Turkson. He's a theologian, but it's not a talk. It's more of an opening prayer. We can make it into a talk. And then we have Father Lawrence Freeman from World Community Christian Meditators, and he's going to open it up in the mystical Christian tradition.
Oh, I know Lawrence. Yeah.
You know, Lawrence, I knew you would. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next morning, it's going to be Rabbi Rosenstock, who's an MD psychiatrist and a Kabbalist. So it's the Jewish version of Judaism, of mysticism, Christianity. And then and then at the beginning of the next day, it's a Sufi, Imam Jamal Rahman, in Sufism. And so they will participate in the panel discussions, but they
Okay.
will not be giving a theological talk. This is more the emphasis on where's the science with regard to the silence and consciousness. That's where it's
Oh,
at.
I see. I mean, when I was referring to spirituality, I wasn't referring to any particular religion. I mean, I was just, spiritual as opposed to religious. I mean, so I wasn't certainly going to say anything from a specifically Christian context. I mean, but
No reason.
Dr.
Another-
Carr, would it help if once I have an opportunity to get these 3 or 4 word descriptions,
yes.
teasers, if I just list them and by name and topic, would that help you get a sense of where we're going or how we're trying to see this progression of what Bob's talking about?
I mean, I'm looking at Jennifer's title in the chat. I mean, I think this is Galaxy, Stars, Planets, and that's great because I mean, basically, it's what's behind me on my Zoom screen, which is great. And I'm just I want to find something for me which links into that. I mean, in some sense, Jennifer's talking about whatever it is after the first several 100 million years, and she's talking about the evidence of her eyes. I'm talking about what happens before then, at the very early times, where it's not so much the evidence of our eyes, it's what comes out of our minds or faith. I'm just wondering if we can get matching titles which somehow marry those ideas up, because how our amazing universe developed, that sort of in some sense covers both our talks, because I'm talking about how it developed in the first million years and
what I'm proposing to do, for not just for you and Jennifer, but for all of the speakers, once I have these 3 or 4 word teasers, I will send a list to everybody. And if you can see that progression, hopefully that will help you with answering some of the concerns you have about what to talk about in your presentation. I'll be more than glad to do that. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when I'll be able to get all that done because I don't know when we're going to go.
No, it's no rush. I mean, but I'd be quite interesting to sort of because it's just Jennifer and myself in our session. Is that correct? It's just the two of us. So Jennifer, I mean, I'm sure we could. I mean, I was just thinking if Jennifer had Galaxy, Stars, Planets or something, and then said something to do with what we observe, the evidence of our eyes, and then in my title, whatever that's going to be, is the evidence, not the evidence of our eyes, but what we infer. I mean, somehow I thought it would be quite nice to get the Big Bang and the haven't quite thought it out, but I thought it'd be really nice if Jennifer and myself could have sort of titles which are coupled in some natural way. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do. I understand what you're saying, and I would suggest respectfully that the two of you take this the two of you discuss this, and we can get to some of the other things on today's agenda.
I mean, I was wondering if somehow we could. I love how our amazing universe develops. If we can somehow use that to cover both talks, and then because
I think what Jan is saying that Jan and Jeff have to get some information here to be able to introduce you.
Yeah.
And I would encourage the two of you to have your own separate Zoom calls and discuss this.
Well, if you just explain, I've got a very clear view now of what Jennifer's going to say, and that's great. It's just a question of because this isn't really a title. These are buzzwords, aren't they? You want rather than a title, but I'm going to try and think of a title as well, because it may be what I'm talking to Jennifer about now is more to do with title than buzzwords. But
that's fine. Then whatever you all decide, email it to me.
Okay, but I mean, Jennifer's is more like a title than buzzwords, isn't it? Because a buzzwords is just 2 or 3 words. Is that right? Is that what you really want, Jan?
Well, what I've come up with for Jennifer at this point is what we see with our eyes. What I've come up with for you is what we accept with our faith. That's the kind of thing I'm looking
Well,
for, a
except,
teaser.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
playing on the word faith, but I shouldn't really say that because if they see the word faith, it'll make it sound as though it's all based on religion.
Yeah.
Where, of course,
That'd be
what I
science.
meant really was we're not dealing with the evidence of our eyes, so that's not quite right either. But nevertheless, I just like. So it was tongue in cheek when I said that cosmology is based on faith because
No, I
it is
know. I
based
get
on
that.
faith, but it's not religious faith. It's faith in theories. But
Well, how about
How about developing universe for Jennifer? Developing universe.
well, they're both developing, you see, because we're both going to be talking about evolution. I mean,
Okay, you two decide and let me
Jennifer,
know.
Jennifer, how our amazing universe started? Is that a reference to my talk then?
yes? So I was thinking,
Okay.
I mean, you were saying that you liked to have that how our amazing universe developed or something for both of us, but yours could be how our amazing universe started, and mine could be, observing galaxies, stars, planets, and life. Or the second piece there, yours could be on, how our amazing universe developed the Big Bang, and then and I could say how our amazing universe developed observing galaxies, stars, planets. I'm getting confused between the title of our talks and the buzzwords that you want,
I am
Jan.
too.
And
It's
so I
not
think,
really, okay, I'm not a scientist,
yeah.
okay? I am a marketer. So what I'm trying to find, and you want to call them buzzwords, that's fine, but that's not the way I think of it. I want the essence of your talk, whatever it's going to be, in 3 or 4 words.
Yeah. I think we know
Okay,
what that
because
talk's
I know
going to
enough
be.
about people in marketing and advertising and all that kind of thing. You give them anything too long and complicated, and they're going to turn it off.
No,
So I
no,
don't
I
want them to
agree.
turn you off before you start speaking.
I mean, in some sense, the title, which covers both our talks, is something like Our Amazing Universe, the Evolution from the Big Bang to Galaxies, Stars, Planets, and Life. So in some sense, that's what the theme is, but that makes it sound as though the Big Bang talk comes first. But
But see, that's not what I'm looking for,
no,
Dr.
I
Carr.
know, but
Yeah,
you want keywords, a few. You want
yep,
basically
exactly.
something which will sell it, which will.
Yep. Oh, good. Yep, you got it. Um,
Well,
Well,
for Dr. Carr, it could just be how the universe began or something.
Yeah.
And mine could be observing galaxies, stars, planets, and life or something. I find that people are drawn into these talks better when there's some word like universe or galaxies
Yeah.
or life or
right,
something like that is an attention getter.
right. I got you. I understand. Okay.
or and the word how the universe began and evolved.
Here's a connection.
The word complex. I quite like the word because for me, the history of the cosmos is one of evolving complexity. But I don't know if you think the word complexity is going to put people off or
Well,
attract
you
them.
can have
No.
that in your title. Like we still need to come up with talk titles, right? Which are
Yeah.
different than what.
Yeah, right. I'm just, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent with this, frankly. I just wanted a few words to use to
okay.
get people's attention. And Jennifer tells us that she's got a kind of, now she's running out of time. And Jeff and I both have some questions. Jeff, why don't you talk about how you're
I
going
can
to-
I can stay on for 20 more minutes, so I'm good.
Okay, well,
Excellent.
Dr. Carr, do you mind if I ask Jennifer my questions and then
No, of
Jeff?
course not. Please go ahead. Yeah,
Right, because they're going to be the same ones I'm going to ask you.
that's okay.
Jennifer, why did you agree to be one of our keynote speakers?
Well, I mean, why are you asking this? Because you want to put something out in advertising or in the
No, this is going to be part of your profile in the program. I'm asking these 5 questions of everybody.
Okay, but I mean, we could do this in writing, maybe, because then I could, if this is going to actually go in the program, I would like to approve the verbiage before it actually goes in the program, right? So I mean, I can say something to you now, but I don't want that in the program until I see exactly what's going to be written there.
You're not the first one that's asked that. All I can tell you is when I get them written, I'll send them to you. Is that
Okay.
okay?
And then if I have edits to them.
Well, I mean, if I say something completely, off base and I miss entirely what you're trying to tell me, yes, of course. Yes.
Well, maybe
but
it would be better
Bob
than
will
if
tell you that
yeah.
I'm not only a good writer, but I'm a good editor.
Okay.
And so, and I interview people all the time.
Well, I guess I could think of the wording better if you emailed it to me so I could be very thoughtful about the words that I use, as opposed to this kind of just off the cuff here.
But see, off the cuff is what gives me what I want.
It's the gut.
The gut. I don't want you to have to think. I don't want to give you time to think about this, Jennifer. I want you to tell me why you agreed when you were approached to be a keynote speaker. What was your initial gut reaction to either yes or no, drop dead, go to hell?
I couldn't have said that.
No, seriously, that's what I'm looking for, is your immediate gut reaction. If you have too much time to think about it, then it comes out as canned. And this is not what I'm looking for at all. I don't want canned. I don't want what you tell everybody else when they interview you. I want something different. I want people to know you a little bit when you get up, stand on that stage. I want them to already kind of have a feel for who you are as a person. Not what your bio tells us.
Let me just think carefully here. I think the recent discoveries in astronomy and cosmology fertilize deep questions of human existence, and I look forward to discussing how these realms of human thought interact with each other.
You thought that when, I guess it was Bob asked you to be a speaker, that was your initial reaction? You want to discuss these recent discoveries?
Well, this is why I really kind of need to think through how to answer this if it's going to be in print, because if it goes in print, then it goes out on social media, it goes out other places. So I kind of need to
I have no plans on putting this on social media.
I know, but other people will, right? I mean, if it's out there, so
all right, if you feel that strongly about it, I guess I don't have any choice, because I need to have a profile of everybody in there.
I also don't think that quickly. I have to kind of
I mean, I know you don't know me.
Why don't you switch to Bernard and
all right. All right. Bernard, why did you agree to be a keynote speaker?
Oh, I've had a lifelong interest in the science spirituality interface, and I do feel they are ultimately going to converge. I think Bob said it well when he said they're going to converge asymptotically, maybe not even asymptotically. But I see that, and not only do I think it's important to have this dialogue between science and spirituality, I think science must expand to accommodate, if you like, spiritual questions. But before it gets there, it has to accommodate mind. It's got to go, science has got to expand to go from matter to mind, if you like, to spirituality. Now that's what drove me. And to me, cosmology is a particularly interesting aspect of that, because when you get back to the creation of the universe, you're talking about problems which are on the border of physics, philosophy, and theology. And so that's what, to me, is fascinating about the Big Bang. It's the overlap of physics, philosophy, and, well, science, philosophy, and theology. And this conference is bringing those three together. And that's what's interesting to me. And I'm interested in all three of those worlds. I'm interested in matter, mind, spirit, science, philosophy.
So this was I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this was an opportunity to explore the things that are interesting to you about these topics.
Interesting to me personally, but also I have to stress that they're not things I would necessarily, I'm now retired, you see, but they're not things I talk about very openly to most of my physics colleagues.
Right.
And that's why I sort of understand what Jennifer's hesitation, because I'm retired. So no one can, I won't get into trouble now. They'll just say, oh, everyone goes crazy when they retire. But nevertheless, I'm happy to say that now. But on the other hand, one has to be a little.
Okay, that's
Not
fine.
many,
I got it.
not many physicists share my ambition to expand physics to accommodate consciousness.
Okay. And so you have an opportunity to do that here. Okay, I got it. I think I already know what the answer to this question is, but what is one key point you want from your presentation you want the audience to remember?
Ooh. Well, the key point for me may not be the key point for the overall meeting or to Bob.
Doesn't
To
matter.
me,
It's for
the key
you.
point is going to be consciousness is a fundamental and not incidental feature of the universe.
Is that
And,
going to be your
and
key point?
consciousness in some sense to me is the culmination of complexity which has arisen out of the cosmic evolution. So to me, that's consciousness to me is really rather key. That's why I keep stressing it. And consciousness, you see, I mean, we talked about matter, mind, and spirit, but consciousness is in all of those. I mean, it's not that consciousness is something confined to mind or spirituality. To me, consciousness is fundamental, even to physics, even to the material world. So that's my particular vision, which not everyone.
That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. And what is one thing that you would like the attendees to know about you as a person? Whether it's science related, career related, family related, whatever. What is one thing that you would like the people to know about you that are listening, that are giving you their time?
Okay, well, one thing I suppose I'd say is that to be a really successful scientist, you focus exclusively on science. To be a really spiritually evolved person, to attain enlightenment or whatever word you want to use, you have to focus entirely on spiritual activity. If you want to be forming a link between science and spirituality, you, in some sense, have to realize you're not going to become the world's greatest scientist, and you're not going to become the world's most enlightened being. But that's a sort of sacrifice you make, I mean, and in trying to bring them together. I personally think it's really important to bring the two worlds together, even though the people I most admire are people who are only in one world. So, for example, Hawking, I had a huge admiration for Hawking, but he wasn't a spiritual being at all. He was completely skeptical of anything to do with spirituality.
So you would
on
like
the other hand, the great spiritual people, like the Dalai Lama, the Pope, or whatever, they're not great scientists. But I mean, it fascinates me that you have to live in the same universe as these really, people who represent the sort of culmination, the greatest thinkers and the greatest spiritual people. And to be able to interact with both of them and bring them together. That's to me what's so rewarding, I suppose.
Okay, and kind of a follow-up question to that, since this is something that was important, or I'm assuming this is not a new thing that's just become important to you. This has been part of who you are since you became an adult. So were you able to satisfy that to a certain degree, either while you were working as a physicist, or since you've been retired, or maybe a little bit of both, where you've been able to discuss with scientists and with spiritual people?
These are really my lifelong interests, my lifelong passions, at least since the age of 15. I can remember 15 because I read some books which sort of determined my past. So it's a lifelong passion.
Okay.
However, in my professional life, I'm a cosmologist. So in my professional life, I wouldn't talk about these other passions. Focus, and so I kept them relatively secret because most of my physics colleagues and friends, they might think I'm crazy, but even worse nowadays, it can affect your job prospects. I mean, you could be fired, or you won't get promotion, or
they wouldn't take your professional credentials seriously.
Exactly. So I mean, it's private, and of course, a lot of scientists keep have religious beliefs which they keep separate from their professional work. And in some sense, although I've always tried to bring them together, I've not been very good at putting my head on the parapet. I mean, I tend to keep my interests in the more religious side, uh, not exactly secret. My friends know, but I
Right.
don't put my head on the parapet. And now I'm retired. The difference between being retired after 3 years ago, I think I retired, is that I can now begin to talk about these things openly. And I won't say, I mean, people might think I'm crazy, but I'm not going to get fired or anything like that.
No, and they're going to think you're just old, and that's why you think that way.
Exactly. They're
And
going to say, oh, well,
Bob and I can relate to that very well because we're both
they're going
old
to
and
say,
retired.
exactly. They're going to say that, oh, now he's become old. He's gone like all these old cosmologists. He's going,
Right. Yes.
But
Yeah.
people who know
Exactly.
me know I've been like this ever since I was a
Yeah.
teenager.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I found the most fascinating about Bob's book before I got to know him as his editor was reading that he's had a lot of these thoughts, literally as you, since he was a teenager when
Yeah.
they were introduced to him. His was math started, I believe, in middle school, junior high,
Yeah.
and then the faith part of it, so he's had these things running around in his head all his life, just like you have. And so I believe me, from working with him, I understand what you're saying. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I appreciate that. And the fourth question probably answered this one too. Is there anything special in particular about you, any which way, that you would like me to include, other than what you just told me about? This has been a lifelong passion.
Oh, well, about me, myself,
Yep.
I don't want to get into personal things. I
No,
mean,
whatever you want to share.
well, I think probably I've I yes, I mean it's reflecting what I've already said really, but to me my passion is connecting the three worlds of matter, mind, and spirit.
Okay. That's
And
what I
that's my
thought.
passion. The word I would use is bridge. For me, it's crucial to form bridges. Now, there are bridges between physics and mind. There are lots of bridges. Now, I'm interested in a subject which is even more taboo. I'm interested in phenomena which are sometimes called psychic, things like telepathy and premonition, which are even more taboo than spirituality, probably. But to me, that's a bridge between physics and the mind. But there are also links between the mind and religion, transpersonal psychology, and things like that. And there are also links between science. I mean, the anthropic principle is an example of a link, a bridge, if you like, between science and spirituality, or theology, if you think it's relevant to God and things. So, yes, I suppose I'm an advocate of forming bridges, but one has to be aware that making bridges does not make you popular because I always have the image of the scream, the famous picture.
Yeah.
If you're on the bridge, you inevitably attract criticism from both people. Like, if you're talking about the bridge between science and spirituality, you're going to get criticized by the scientists because you're too spiritual, but you're going to be criticized by the spiritual people because you're too
You're
scientific.
too scientific, right?
So
Yes, I got
being
it.
on a bridge is painful and you have to make the sacrifice, but you need to build the bridge. So I suppose if there was one word, I would say build the bridges, and especially between these three worlds, matter, mind, and
Your
spirit.
three worlds you're speaking of are matter, mind, and spirituality.
Yeah, you can say matter, mind, and spirit, or you can say science, um, science, humanities, religious studies.
Okay.
I mean, you can interpret those three worlds in different ways, but or you can talk about body, psyche, soul. So there are different ways of talking about those three worlds, but it's forming, whatever words you use,
Bridges. Okay.
forming
Thank you.
bridges.
Thank you very much. You gave me a really good, some good things to think about and work with in your profile. I thank you for that.
And thank you, Jan.
I want to mention.
Jennifer,
I'll mention
did you
real
get a
quick
sense now?
I do, yes. So actually, if you just send me your email address, I can just send these to you.
Okay, it's editor@contemplative.net.
That's her email address.
That's my email address.
It's on the
And if you would like to get, I
Mm.
understand your concerns. If you would like to get a sense of how I write and how I approach things, I'm the managing editor of this Contemplative Network newsletter, and we have them in archives on our CN website. And you will find several different interviews that I've done, feature stories that I've written that will give you a sense of how I write, which might make you feel a little bit more comfortable answering these questions.
Okay, well, I think I've answered them all except the fourth one. I wasn't quite sure when you said, is there anything special or particular about me that you would like to include?
Yeah, that you personally would like to make sure is is in that profile about you.
Okay, but again, I'm sending you the exact verbiage here. Like, I don't want any verbiage going out that I haven't approved about myself, because I'm in a very sensitive position
I know you are.
here. So I don't agree to anything coming out except what I've seen and approved. So if you want to send me draft
that's fine. I
material,
can do
that's
that.
great.
I can
Yeah.
appreciate what you're saying. Yes, I
Okay.
truly can appreciate what you're saying.
But I sent you some stuff just now that I think answers the mail there, but you'll see it soon. I CC'd you, Bob. So okay.
All right. Thank you for that, Jennifer. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for understanding that I carry a
Well,
sense.
you are in a sensitive position, and I get that.
Yes,
And you
okay.
don't know me from until 20 minutes
Well,
ago.
here's the thing that, like, I'm seen, even though I'm not representing NASA or anything at this conference, but I'm sort of can be seen that way anyway. So I have
Yes,
to,
I know.
make sure that
Now,
what's
you've spoken for Bishop Barron, haven't you?
I did. Yes, I spoke. So we
Okay.
went through this
So,
there too. So
treat treat this that way.
okay. Well, then I appreciate that, because they were very careful to make sure that everything they said about me, I got to approve.
We'll honor what they honor to you, basically.
Got it. Thank you for your understanding. And I sent you some stuff so you can tell me if that will work.
Okay. I will check it out when we finish here.
All right.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm coming up with a title at the moment, but you can tell me if this is appropriate. I quite like the idea of something like, and I think this is title rather than keywords, but I quite like something like the beginning of the universe and the view beyond. The world.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The view beyond, because it's going beyond what Jennifer's going to talk about.
I really like that.
All right. Would you repeat that again, please, so I can?
The beginning of the universe and the view beyond.
Okay, thank you.
But I think that's a title probably rather than key. But the word view beyond is a little bit opaque unless one's understood how it relates to Jennifer's talk.
I put that in the chat, but I think that's really great. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. You've read my mind. Oh no, you actually wrote this. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. You all are giving me a lot of information. One of the reasons I enjoy these conversations, just listening, I learn a lot about you just listening to you talk. That's how I tend to write profiles, is listening to your words and what you say. And I work very diligently not to misstate things about people, because I've had it happen to me and I know the feeling. And Jennifer, you're absolutely correct. Once it's out there, you can't erase it. So I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Very quickly, I was looking at a quote, and Bernard's right on in that, he's not alone in this consciousness issue. One can argue that the universe governed by laws that do not allow for consciousness is no universe at all. Roger Penrose. We cannot, everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing postulates consciousness. Max Planck, Nobel Prize winner for quantum theory. So this is not something new, but,
not at all.
But Bernard has brought this to the point where it's exciting, and it's going to be incredible when he presents this. I can just feel it.
I want to feel what I felt from you both today. I want that excitement to come through to our audience, to our attendees at the conference. I and I think Bob would agree with me on this. Bob and I've been talking about this conference and how we want it to be for the people who come for months now, even before we had identified the speakers. And we want it relatable and understandable. And we want people to be excited about what you're telling them. And the
Yeah.
only way that's going to happen is if you're really excited about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we are. So,
Yeah, I get that feeling. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know you don't have much time left, so I want to just cover a couple issues.
okay.
This is not going to happen without registrants on the conference.
Yeah.
So I really need for you to give me the links that you are showing where you're promoting this conference on your various websites, et cetera, and to look to see if what we have on the website for you as a promoter is accurate. Okay. So, for example, right now I've got Bernard as the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion. Well, that's only a side issue. I think you have
Sorry,
other.
what you mean? I'm not connected with the Faraday Institute. I'm not quite sure why you said that.
Well, I thought you had checked this out earlier, but I apologize.
No, I'm not. I mean, I know about the Faraday Institute, but I'm not a member of it.
No, I understand, and I think it might have come from this.
I can't quite see that. It's a bit dim. Ah, I see. But there shouldn't be any reference to the Faraday Institute
Okay,
there.
and I understand that. So what I'm thinking of is the Mystics, and it's part of the SMN organization.
The link you should put, if you want to put a link, it should be
Right.
the Scientific and Medical Network.
The what?
The Scientific and Medical Network, which you've spoken to, Bob.
Okay, and actually, that has been. I've got. Bear with me.
There it is.
David Larimer has agreed to promote this.
Oh, absolutely. But David isn't a speaker, is that right?
No, he's not a speaker, but he's a promoter as part of SMM.
Of course, I was going to say I'm the president of the Scientific and Medical Network, so I will, of course, make sure with David that this gets lots of promotion.
Wonderful. So what I'll do is I can replace your name with his. Okay.
Yeah, but the point is, he's not connected with the Faraday Institute either. So it's fine, the reference to the Scientific and Medical Network, but I should not be linked to the Faraday Institute because I'm not a member of it.
We'll delete that.
Yeah,
But,
if you want to, of course, my college is Queen Mary, but that's not what you want. I think the most natural affiliation is the Scientific and Medical Network.
So should I change your name to and for Larimer's or?
Yes.
Well,
that's what he's saying.
Where you mentioned my name earlier, and I just don't want it to be connected with the Faraday Institute because that's not accurate.
And I thought so because I have never heard back from you on this, so I'm glad.
Well, I never saw that. I mean, I never went to this website. Maybe I'm supposed to look at it, but
well, definitely, yeah. I will take you off. And now there's another organization that I understand. It's the Mystics and Scientists part of SMN.
That's not an organization. That is one of the annual conferences which they've had for the last, for 30-something years. I mean, the Scientific and Medical Network is 50 years old, and they organize 2 annual meetings. One is called Mystics and Scientists, and one is called Beyond the Brain.
Okay, well, I will change your name. Your name is in place of Lorimer's.
Yes, but my name at the moment appears twice, doesn't it? Is that right?
No.
Yeah, you're right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete.
I mean, my understanding is David isn't.
We will delete this. We'll delete that.
Yeah, because David isn't a speaker, if I understand correctly.
But that doesn't matter. But I still would prefer you as a speaker there. So
well, I would put Scientific and Medical Network for me because I'm the president of the Scientific and Medical Network.
Okay, yeah, and I got it, and I'll make those changes.
Right.
Now,
David is much more important than me, even though I'm the president. That's just a temporary position, and he's been running it for 50 years or whatever. So
yeah,
it's
exactly
40 years. But nevertheless, I think from the purpose of this thing, I certainly shouldn't be Faraday Institute, and Scientific and Medical Network is the most natural link.
Yeah, and I got the point. Thank you. So the question then becomes one of, I need the links to where you might be promoting it. Now, I realize, Jennifer, you're in a different circumstance. I'm assuming you can't be promoting this on a NASA website. Is there any other website you could promote it on, or newsletter?
Well, I think maybe it could be promoted on well, I would say the Faraday Institute, if they can promote it, and also the American Scientific Affiliation, which is a network
Mhm.
of Christians in science, might be interested in posting it. There's
If you
two.
have
And then there's a
connections to them, can you make those connections and do that?
I can try. Can you send me the website? Is it www.faith-science.org? Is that the
I
one?
will send you an email with the supporting documents to be able to promote it.
Okay, well, I'll forward them to also there's something called Sinai and Synapses, which is it's a Jewish-based faith and science organization in the US, but they also do a lot of interfaith stuff, and they might be interested in this as well. So if you send me the material, I can send it on to these types of organizations.
Yeah,
And
and
when
if you
you
would
do that,
blind
Jennifer,
copy me when you do that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
yeah, and when you do that as a incentive, let them know if they let us, put it on our the website, they will have a printed reference in the program with their
Oh, okay.
name and if, like their website and all that, their website address and that kind of thing. That's part of the incentive. It's free advertising, because it'll go and I'm doing that for everybody who's agreeing to promote the conference will be listed in the website.
I can give you three other organizations which we can advertise it. Well, the Faraday Institute itself is one of them, but
Yeah,
I think,
for sure.
but there's also the International Society for Science and Religion. I'm a
Yes.
member of that, but I'm not a very active member. But that's primarily Christian. Well, not completely Christian, but I mean, the focus is probably mainly Christian. That's the ISSR. So I'm sure they will be happy to advertise the event.
Okay. And again, you have influence over them. I would ask you to do that then.
Well, I'm a member. I'll ask them to advertise it. And then well, let's just think. And then the Scientific and Medical Network, and the Faraday Institute. I think I think that was all. I thought I had another one in mind, but it seems to have. Yeah, I think ISSR definitely it should be. Yeah, I think it was just the Faraday Institute and the ISSR.
Okay. So if you get the Faraday Society to promote it, in spite of that, I will take a reference to them off of the promoters list.
Yeah, that's
The
sensible.
only reason, not everybody that's promoting this gets on the website, but
Yeah.
what Jen is saying is that everyone who promotes it will be on the program.
Oh, I know. I've just remembered the third one, Bob.
Yeah.
This is Lawrence Freeman's organization, which is, I think of it as being called Meditatio, but I mean, I don't know if that's the formal.
It's WCCM, and he's agreed to do it.
Oh, right. So you already have that anyway.
I got him.
What about the Society of Catholic Scientists? They are really a growing new organization that's very, very vibrant right now. So, and given that, where this is being held, you might get some interest from this Society of Catholic Scientists.
Well, I contacted them, and do you have influence to be able to pull it off?
Well, you're just asking them to advertise the conference, right? Is that
right? And I can tell you, if it's not as if I haven't been around the horn a little bit. These are all of them.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, then you've already done a lot of work here, it looks like.
Well, yeah, but contacting them and getting them to put it on their newsletters and websites means you have to have influence, and I don't have influence in all of these organizations.
Well, I will.
Yes, Jeff. Yes, Jeff. Just something this. Yes. People should feel free to email me after this, but I'm going to have to go because I need to be someplace at 1:30. So please feel free to email me if there's any other questions.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some elements in terms of the actual presentation on stage or at the
Yeah.
platform that would be useful to go over. And this has been very productive, and I've been able to pick up a lot through notes. But there are just some elements that, again, speaking to your interest in making sure that you're comfortable with how I introduce you, the question and answers afterward, it would just be
Yes.
useful for us to be able to talk.
I appreciate that. Okay. And are you having the same kind of meeting with the other speakers as well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
All
we
right.
are. Yes, we
Wow.
are. And also, we're trying to pull together, hopefully this will happen, a cocktail party before for just the speakers.
Yeah.
So that you have at least an opportunity for an hour or so,
Yeah.
to shake hands and see people face to face.
Now, I know
Okay.
you're time limited, Jennifer, so I'll let Jeff continue. Go ahead.
Oh, I think there are probably more questions that I had than we have time here, and I want to respect Jennifer's need to get to her meeting. But basic elements will be what I'll send you is what do you like in an introduction? Because I know as a speaker myself, there are things that I sort of wince when I hear people introduce me. And then also, we're hoping again to try to develop some linkage for you to pose a question for Dr. Carr to consider in his presentation. And then also for the Q&A that you and I'll have afterward. Are there any questions? And I can see there's a wealth of information that you've passed on, both of you, to bring up in terms of Q&A after your presentations, and then when you join together, what might be some good things to talk about. So maybe just consider those, and I can forward that to you.
Well, I think that the question really is, what is your goal for the conference? Like, are you trying to draw people who are already spiritual and religious to think how science is compatible with that? Or are you trying to help people who are not necessarily spiritual or religious to think about how science is maybe makes these kinds of questions more compelling? Or are you trying to just enlighten people about science and about how deep these questions of spirituality are? So it kind of depends on what the goal of your conference
Right.
is, what is it that who we invite, and what will they get out of this? What are you hoping to? Yeah.
We're
If
trying
I
to
may, and then I know Bob's going to be able to add some things there because he's the one that's devising that. I think to a certain degree, it's going to be self-selecting, and you'll have people falling into both of those categories. I think the question came up earlier in terms of the technical or scientific nature of both of your presentations. How much did you want to get into the spiritual faith type aspects, mind, matter, etc.? I think certainly it's really beneficial to get into some of the implications of those in your talks, or maybe that's a fertile area for us to handle in the Q&A, because that's essentially a way of drawing a thread through each of the presentations. And then for the final dialogue, am I sort of along the right lines there, Bob, on what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the goal was to educate people on the fact that faith and science are not mutually contradictory. That's a misconception.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, good. I'm sorry I do have to run, but I really have enjoyed this conversation, and I think I feel a lot of energy here. So I think it will be good, and I look forward to our continued planning. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your time. Thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
Jennifer.
Bye-bye.
Well, if you have time left and you want to say
I
something.
have a little time. I mean, I found that a very useful, very pleased to meet Jennifer, especially, yeah. So I think it clarified a lot of issues, yeah. And I also understand Jennifer's situation, because she has to be quite careful what she says in the public domain, because of her role in NASA, whereas I don't have to be very careful. I mean, I have to. I was careful before retirement, what I said, but even now, in fact, now I appear quite a lot on YouTube and things like that in the spiritual domain, so to speak, in the science spiritual domain. So I don't mind what people think at this. I don't mind if people.
I was, Dr. Carr was thinking that that seems to be one of those incredible, unexpected benefits of being retired. That we really don't.
Yeah. It's in a way that's true, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, what I've found is, although I'm retired, I'm more active in my conventional research than I was before. I do more research now, even within cosmology,
Mm.
than I did before I retired. I no longer do teaching and I no longer do admin, but I do research. I don't get paid for it because I'm retired. I just get my pension. And so it's a strange thing. So in a way, I thought, well, when I'm retired, I'll be able to spend all my time on the more spiritual or controversial things. But actually, I find I'm just as busy doing ordinary cosmology. So it's, in a certain sense, because although retirement means I can come out, I can come out of the closet, so to speak, in terms of my interests. I find, much to my surprise, I don't have so much more time to think about these things because I'm still an emeritus professor. So I still spend a lot of time. Well, I still spend a lot of time doing conventional cosmology research, but I do spend more time thinking about these sorts of science. I've always pursued the science spirituality link, but it's just been a question of how much time you spend
Right.
on activity, and it has gone up. It has gone up since retirement, but it's not like 100%. It's I used to think, well, I'll be a scientist till I'm retired, and then I'll become a mystic or something. But it's not worked out quite like that.
Well, there's still time,
Well, I always say when I have these discussions, I've always said, when I was saying how you can't really be a top scientist and a top mystic, you have to make a choice. And so I always say, I was having a discussion with one of these gurus called Sadhguru the other day, and I said, I know I'm not going to be enlightened in this life, so it doesn't bother me. I'll become enlightened in the next life. And he said, "What?" He said, "You can't say that. You'll put me out of a job." He said, my job is to get people enlightened. So if they keep saying, "I'm enlightened," that's quite funny. So I used to think, well, I'll just become a scientist for the first before retirement, and after that, I can maybe think about getting.
When I grow up, I can be what I want to be.
When I grow up, I'm becoming but I know I'm not going to become enlightened. Whatever enlightened means. I mean, we don't in Christian theology, you don't have the phrase enlightened, do you? But I mean, I'm not going to become a saint, put it that way. Yeah,
I've been doing research. One of the columns I do for the newsletter is a message from the mystics. And I have confined my research to people who lived in the 20th and 21st century.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Partly because I want people to know that, yes, there were some incredible mystics back 5, 6, 7, 800 years ago, but we still have them with us today. They're still walking and talking and working and screwing up and, just like everyday people. Yeah. And I've learned a lot about it. I've learned a lot about how people are identified as mystics. So don't sell yourself short, Dr. Carr.
Well, I mean, I'm very interested in mysticism because I believe, because I'm not just a materialist physicist, as you'll appreciate, I believe there's this higher realms of reality. Well, you can call them spiritual realms, whatever word you want to use. So, I've had psychic experiences, but I've not had full-blown mystical experiences. But I've met people who have, and I realize it's a genuine phenomenon. That the mystical experience is putting you in touch with a greater reality. And I don't know, you can use a word like God or whatever, but I mean, it's from my perspective, it's there. But I still don't think of myself as a very spiritual person. But I'm very interested in.
Believe it or not, a lot of the mystics didn't. At least that's what I'm learning as I'm doing the research, particularly the ones of the last, say, 100 years. Yeah, the research I'm doing on these people, not most, but a lot of them did not think of themselves as mystics. Other people did, but they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I certainly wouldn't want to be a guru. I mean, I'm a bit put off gurus, to be honest. But I mean, but you realize that gurus do have a big influence.
Yes, they do.
I had a dialogue with Sadhguru I mentioned, and I was amazed to find this dialogue is on YouTube. It's had several million views. And I came to realize that actually gurus have far more followers than professors. and so if you're interested in sort of getting, they don't have the influence in academia, but in terms of the human race, they have more influence. And I found that fascinating because it's I mean I do quite a lot of YouTube thing, but they never get more than really 1,000 views. But this was 1 million views. I was just bizarre, really. But it's but there are people like a friend of mine is called Ravi Ravindra, and I don't know, but he's in Halifax, but he's a spiritual person. But he was trained as a scientist, as a physicist. Then he joined a philosophy department, and now he was on the spiritual path, and he's older than me. But there are people who I don't think he wouldn't call himself a mystic, because I think the real mystic, when people say they're enlightened, I tend to be rather skeptical.
For sure.
Because
I'm thinking of an experience that, and Bob and Jan both know this, Father Thomas Keating. One time a woman asked him, who had gone to one of his presentations, in terms of, how long will it be until I'm enlightened? And he looked at her seriously and then paused and said, you'll be the last to know.
that's a nice phrase, yeah. Because of course you don't use the word enlightenment in Christian theology, do you? It's not a term you would use, but what would the phrase be in Christian? Just a mystic, basically, I suppose. I mean, because enlightenment is, I associate it with Buddhism because I was always interested in Buddhism.
Yeah.
But in Buddhism and Hinduism, you have the concept of enlightenment, which is becoming one with God in some sense, one with the great consciousness.
Well, in the Christian, it's more divine union. And
if in
go ahead.
so you're saying it's union with God in some sense is the common.
Yeah, more of a divine union that you experience.
Divine union. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Father Thomas Merton, you heard of
course. Yeah,
was
yeah.
approached by James Finley, who's one of our speakers. And James Finley was 17 years old, and he was and Merton was his novice master at a Trappist monastery. And Finley said to Merton very sheepishly, he says, I read Teresa of Avila's seven-story mountain, and not seven-story mountain, but the Teresa of Avila's writings, and which room he was in. He says, I think I got to the third castle. What do you think, Father Merton? And Father Merton looked at him. He says, none of your damn business. Which is another way of saying, you'll be the last to know.
No, that's a lovely phrase. You'll be the last to know. Yeah. But
Jeff, you answered.
Well, that's been a very interesting conversation, and I hope I've got to begin to go at some point because it's approaching dinner time in England. I know we're all in different.
That's right.
We're all in different time zones. You're in America, Jeff, presumably. Is that right?
I'm on the West Coast. Yes, I'm in Seattle.
Oh, right. So for you, it's even breakfast time or something. Yeah.
I've been there, but no, don't want to hold you up on dinner. You've given a lot of very valuable things, and I'm an avid note taker.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I notice you taking notes, and I guess we'll have it's still a long way off, June, from my perspective.
It is. What I'll try to do, Dr. Carr, is go ahead and email you, if I may. And
that's fine.
Here are some thoughts in terms of introducing you, questions for follow-up, and just see what you think is congenial to you and what makes sense.
Fine, yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
For extended discussions, I much prefer Zoom to email because I'm a very slow typist, and it takes me so by emails.
And we could certainly do that.
If it's just something, but if it's just something like improving text, that's fine. Of course, I can do that. I don't like long discussions through email.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well, this is recorded, so you'll get a copy of what we spoke about. That helps sort.
Great, yeah, great.
Okay.
The other thing I found now recently, we get becoming quite impressed with AI. The way AI can edit what you say. You can obviously say things and AI will take it and then it'll turn it into proper English, because I find when I speak, it's never it sounds all right, but then when you read it, it's all incoherent and ungrammatical. But AI can cure all that. So
yeah, but what's interesting about AI is it eliminates any possibility of a future Einstein, because anybody that thinks outside the box and it's not in the database that it's calling on, it's not there.
Yeah, I'm not an advocate of AI.
No,
However,
I know you're not.
I
I
can
just thought
see
I'd mention
there's
that.
some things it does well. For example, one thing I've discovered, I'm always being asked to write articles about black holes and things, and by the time you've written 20 articles on black holes, you can't keep re-expressing the same ideas in different ways. But then you get into trouble because people say, this is self-plagiarism. You repeated what you said in an article 10 years ago. And it's absurd because I think you should be allowed to self-plagiarize, but the publishers get a very worried about anything, they don't want to be sued. It's all litigation. So what I only discovered this week, you can take something you've written before, give it to AI or Chat GPT. It'll rephrase it so it says exactly the same thing, but without repeating any words. Did you?
I may have to try that.
I asked AI what is the difference between faith and science? How do they relate? And it came back with very flowery language saying basically they contradict each other. And I thought, that's why we're doing a conference.
Well, I tell you, so another thing that happened last week, I wrote a long paper with some colleagues in cosmology. It was a 100-page paper, and you can get some software. It creates a podcast, and the podcast takes the paper, and then it will have a discussion between two people about the paper in very positive. This was amazing. And what's more, this paper's 100 pages long, so it would have taken a week to read. In 10 minutes, ChatGI had read the paper and produced this fascinating discussion between a man and a woman. And somehow it had got the key points of the paper
Really?
and
Wow.
got them across in this conversation. I was amazingly impressed. And you can probably do that. You could do that with your book, for example, Bob. You could give it your book and ask it to generate a podcast. And you will have someone maybe with the voice of the Pope or something like that, but you'll have someone talking about it. And I only discovered this a couple of days ago, that this is what they can do now. So although I'm very wary about the future of Chat GPT taking over the world and all that, but it is good for some things.
Yeah, it is good for some things, there's no question. But anyway,
Try putting your book in. I don't know if anyone has ever done it with the whole book, but I mean, you'll find it's really, you might be impressed with what it does.
well, thank you. You glanced at the book, I take it. You looked at it.
Yeah, but I don't have it in front of me because you sent it me some time ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
So
And it tries, what we're doing in this conference kind of follows that pattern, basically.
my understanding is the book, in some sense, has prompted the conference. Is that right?
It's going to be handed out as one of the items for registrants. They can get a copy. It'll be part of the registration fee.
But to answer your question, yes, Dr. Carr, the book did prompt the conference. Yes,
right.
It did.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost a natural outgrowth of the book.
Sorry.
So all speakers should have read the book before they give their talks.
Well, but as the author, it's kind of hard to tell them that.
I'm not the author, I'm the editor, and I agree, Dr. Carr, everybody should read that book that's going to be on that stage. Now, whether they will or not, I can't force that. But I feel like I read the darn thing 9 times. You all can read it at least once.
But you're the editor, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And I'm sure you did a much better job than any Chat GPT would have done.
Oh, well, thank you for that. But I look at it like I say, I read it 9 times, so you all can read it once.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. That's great. Then 10 times in total. Yep.
You have a wonderful evening and enjoy your dinner.
Thank you so much. It's been delightful to meet all of you and indeed Jennifer as well. And I look forward to physically meeting. But of course, we'll probably have another Zoom meeting, won't we, at some point? I mean, maybe not this subset of people, but...
Now, that's probably a very good idea, and at the very least, the 2 of you. And I would love to participate. That would be wonderful. But this cocktail party that Jan mentioned is going to be on the deck of the Apollo 6 Hotel, and it'll overlook the top of the St. Peter's Square.
Oh, lovely.
And about 150 yards away is St. Peter's lit up. And
lovely.
you can look at St. Peter's and have scotch.
And is they going, oh yeah, that'd be great. Is there going to be a reception with the Pope, did you say? I mean, is he going to one of the
As a matter of fact, I'm working on that right now. So with the Pope, it's availability issue. All of a sudden,
of
he gets
course,
called away.
yeah.
But yes, for just the registrants, it's a special audience is what we're working on. And what I've learned is that when you have a conference like that, you got everything organized, and then all of a sudden the Pope's available now, but not when you scheduled him. And then the whole conference schedule gets mixed around until you can go see him and then come back. So you got to be
Yes,
flexible.
yes, yeah, of course. Anyway, it was great to meet you all.
Great to
Most
meet you
definitely,
too.
and I'll
Thank
be
you
in
for
touch
your
with you,
time.
Dr.
Yeah.
Carr, on some of those follow-ups.
Look forward to it.
Okay, then. I look forward to those emails, and you've got my email address and things.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.